Hello and welcome to week 9. We are out of midterms and we are moving into the last half of the semester. We are almost done. Spring break is next week, so everything will be due on Sunday, and there will be nothing that you have to do next week. Um, it is pretty cool. I can't go question to question to review the midterm because there's one person who had a doctor's note and they haven't taken it yet. But the average score is an 89.6. So we can pretty much say that most of you, or the average of you, um, got an A on this test. The average time spent on the test was 49 minutes. I gave you 2 hours, and nobody, well, the average time was 2 minutes. Um, what else do I got that I can share with you? Um, so there were several of you that did not take the test. I know one of you have an excuse, and so you were allowed to. Um, I'm giving you a couple more days to get the midterm done, but just going through the grades, we've got a 95, an 89, an 84, a 98, a 97, an 86. One, two, three of you did not take the midterm, which and did not communicate to me that we had an issue that you needed to take it over. All three of you have been struggling anyway, and hadn't been completing a whole lot of the the assignment we have anyway. But midterms were over. It was the Ides of March. I was had a crusade this weekend that I was working. They're called the Reconcilers Motorcycle Ministries. You go to their website, go to Reconcilers Ministries, look for their pictures. You might end up seeing me there with a whole bunch of inmates at some point this week. Um, Most of you did very good. A's and B's, pretty much all of you, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so now that I've completed that, let's go into week 9, and we're going to go into our assignments first this week. So let me share my screen. Okay, so the PowerPoint, which we're going to be looking at here in a few minutes, is here. The lesson plan on domestic violence. I actually might go and give a different lecture, not follow the actual chapter. I've got a um, domestic violence PowerPoint lecture that I wrote that I really enjoy better, and it'll just be in addition to the web links for chapter 7, the quiz, and then the discussion. Okay, so the discussion, we already have people have answered it. Do you think parents have the right to discipline their teenage children? What do you think about hitting, slapping, yelling, restricting youth to their rooms, or imposing monetary penalties or some form of corporal punishment? I have a t-shirt that says, if you discipline your child, I wouldn't have to. Correctional officers. So let's have a discussion on discipline and how we should go about disciplining our children. Again, this is opinion, but I want your opinion based and backed by the literature. Okay, so you must have a uh, list of sources, in-text citations in your original source. I know a lot of several of you got zeros on the last discussion from a couple weeks ago. A couple of you, I don't know why you got a zero, but a lot of you got really bad grades because there was no list of sources. We were talking about protests and demonstrations, um, but you didn't back your opinion or your thoughts with the literature, and that's what hurt you. And it hurt a lot of you with your grades. You with the original post, you have to have the literature to back up your opinion, and a list of sources and in-text citations. Okay, so regardless of if you participated, what were your thoughts about, the question included, what were your thoughts about demonstrations and how they go about? So you should have went to the First Amendment, the right to assemble and petition grievances against our government, uh, and things such as that nature. And so we want to do the same thing. Again, you're going to get points taken off if you do not follow my schedule. My schedule is the original post is due by Wednesday. Okay. On Thursday, I will go through and answer some. On Saturday, I'll go through and answer some. On Sunday, I'll go through and answer some. But your original post is due on Wednesday. I want you to respond to at least 3 classmates by Friday. And then by Sunday, I want you to reply to at least 2, but anybody that has responded to you. I know those of you who post early, like Miss Olds here, they're going to get a whole lot more than everybody else. Okay. But if you're not posted by Wednesday, people cannot participate and with your original post. I know some of you go, well, I'll just post everything on Sunday. Well, that's going to cost you points, and that's costing you points in your world of what we're doing and what's going on. So you need to make a point to make your original post by Wednesday, respond to 3 classmates by Friday, reply to at least 2, but as many as you want by Sunday at 6:00. If nobody has responded or replied to you by 6:00 Sunday evening, I am not going to hold you accountable for it unless your post isn't until Sunday. If your post is on Sunday, your original post is on Sunday, and nobody responds to you so that you have nobody to reply to, I'm going to hold that against you because the original post is due on Wednesday. Okay, so now that we've covered that, let's get moving into the next thing. Let's close this. Project essay outline is also due today. Not today, but Sunday. Okay, and it's going to be an alphanumeric outline, and I've got an example there. Okay, so you'd have your paper title, you've got your introduction underneath your introduction, and this isn't set properly. So the A paragraph will be indented 1. The 1 will be indented 2. The subpoint will be indented 3. So you hit the tab, so you've got the introduction, you've got your body, your A paragraph is going to be tabbed over 1 tab. Your first point on your first paragraph is going to be 2 tabs. And then any subpoints are going to be 3 tabs, etc. That is due on Sunday. This is based upon your approved research project. Don't give me an outline for something else. I'm going to go back and I'm going to see what research project you were approved to do. And then this outline is going to tell me what your paper is going to follow. And this outline is a great working tool because it allows you to organize your thoughts and it allows you to keep your paper in order. And then you can turn around and take this outline and you use it as your headings and subheadings for your APA paper at the end of the book, at the end of the semester. So you've got your title paper, you've got your introduction, and then if you've got you introduce your paper, you explain why it's important, and then you've got your body, and then the body of your paper, you have your headings and subheadings on the different topics that you're going to be covering. So you could take this whole outline and just copy and paste it into your research paper and then just add the text that you need for each of these sections. Okay, so that is there today. Okay, so the PowerPoint that we have is a line along the book and it follows the book, and this covers violence at home, in the classroom, and on the job. Yeah, that's not what I'm looking for. No, I'll just go here. Yeah, so these are all the classes I taught at UTPB. That's all CJAD, so let's go back one. There we go. Okay, so domestic violence. Domestic violence is defined, or we see domestic violence as hurting those people that we love. All right, so each of us are on our own journey. Each of us have our own adventure. We encounter all kinds of challenges and choices as we make and we work on our um, as we go. These choices will stretch us, test us, and push us to our limits. And our adventure will make us stronger than we ever know we could be. And this is from Garcia off of Criminal Minds. Okay, so domestic violence, as defined as physical, sexual, economic, or psychological abuse directed towards one's spouse, partner, or other household member, um, or family member within living in the household. So if you're roommates, you don't have to be married, but if you're living in the household and you get into a fight, that is domestic violence. A lot of attention has been given to domestic violence, um, or attention to domestic violence began within the women's feminist movement, about concerns about wives being beaten by their husbands. And this has remained a major focus for modern feminism, and particularly in terms of violence against women, because, you know, as opposed to popular belief, women are a gentler of our species. It is the gentler gender of our species. And throughout history, the patriarchy, men have uh, thought it was their right to be able to beat and abuse women. So the popular emphasis has trended to be on women as the victims of domestic violence, but women are not the only victims. Men are also victims. With the rise of men's rights movements, there's now some advocacy for men as victims. Although the statistics concerning the number of male victims are strongly contested by the groups, because there is not a whole lot of violence against men. Well, is that because that men are not being violated and men are not being are not victims of violence from women or other men? Or is it because there's this stigma within the patriarchy that men are not going to admit that that they're being abused and beaten up by the women in their lives? So domestic violence takes a lot of different forms. Okay, there's physical violence, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, intimidation, economic deprivation, threats of violence, stress, verbal abuse, control. These are all different aspects of violence, and violence comes within a cycle. You know, the cycle of violence follows the same routine over and over and over again. It starts with nagging. You need to do this. You need to do this. You need to do this. And then it moves to warning signs where the abuser starts screaming and yelling and cussing and smashing things and breaking things and making things a whole lot worse for the people, you know, their victims. Okay. And then eventually the smacking and destroying things turns into violence where they strike out and they actually use violence against the person and the victim of their crime. Then they feel bad about their response because, you know, they're remorseful because they didn't mean to do this, and they start feeling bad for what they did, and they try to make up for it. You know, they say, I'm sorry, and they find something to stress, something to blame their reactions on and their violence on. Well, it's at work. There's violence at work. You know, my boss is mean, my boss is cruel. I'm sorry, I was drinking and I was drunk and I didn't know what I was doing. Please forgive me. Please let me back into your house. And she does. She does. She goes, okay, well, it was my fault. I burnt the supper. It was my fault. Dinner wasn't ready. It was my fault because I spent too much time on the phone and not enough time paying attention to him. It was my phone because I spent too much time with my girlfriends and not enough time with him and paying attention to his needs. So, yes, I'll do better. And then the cycle starts all over again. So this cycle suggests this cycle or research shows that this cycle will repeat 6 or 7 times. At the end of that 7 times, somebody leaves in a body bag. If you do not get a control of it, you do not get the abuser out of the house, or the victim don't get out of that house, by the end of the 7th time, we have a burning bed situation where she, in fear of her life, will kill him. Or, which happens most of the time, the abuser kills the victim. So the power and control, and this is how abusers abuse. Okay, it is about power and control, and each of these, and it might be a little small on your screen, but I'm going to go through each of these individually, and we're going to start with minimizing, denying, and blaming. Okay, so we make light of the abuse. We make light of, you know, of what's going on. You don't listen to her, and I'm going to use her as the victim because the majority of the time, her is the victim or she is the victim. And I know in this world of pronouns, we'll just say that she and her 95% of the time is the victim or are the victim of domestic violence in any household, regardless of gender identity. The pronouns her and she are normally the victims. Okay, they deny that the abuse occurred. I haven't done that. You know, they just outright lie about it. They deny that it's happening. I'm not abusing you. I'm providing for your every need. You're not taking care of me. You're not doing the things that you're supposed to do. It's your fault because of your mouth. Okay, like this picture that I'm showing. You know, she's obviously very hostile. So the man's just going to turn around and punch her in the face and dot her eyeball or break her nose because of the actions. And she is, according to the view of this picture and saying that she caused the abuse following this logic, she is received and she is the reason that she receives this abuse. Like I've already said, blaming an outside event, a situation, loss of employment, your drugs, alcohol, just not feeling good. There's something else that's causing you to reach out and abuse your partner. So, intimidation. Okay, so here we go. We have intimidation where you're threatening to hit them. I know of a story where a husband and wife were having problems and issues, and she left. She went home to her parents' house, and a couple days later, she decided to go back to the house so that she could get um, some more clothes, thinking that he wasn't home. She unlocks the door. She walks into the door, and he pulls a gun on her and threatens to kill her if she ever comes back. So just making her afraid of the way that she looks at him, or any actions or gestures that she uses. The biggest thing is the rolling of the eyes. Don't you roll your eyes at me? Smack. And somebody gets hit or be smashing things, breaking things, not actually striking out towards her, but breaking things that she likes and that she wants and that she has, destroying her property, destroying her personal belongings, kicking the dog, being mean to the dog or the children, pulling a weapon on them, like the story that I've already shared with you, hiding or destroying important papers, such as your passports, your IDs, your driver's license, taking away your credit cards, making sure that the credit cards, can't be used by her, controlling, everything that, she has, any ability for her to get out of the way. I had a family member who was a victim of domestic violence. And one of the things that the abuser was doing was, telling him, if you don't comply and you don't do what I'm telling, if you don't just allow me to beat the crap out of you every day, I'm going to go tell your family members that you're doing drugs and you're stealing drugs from other people and you're stealing prescription drugs from people and you're using drugs. So in order to make sure that the family was not disappointed in this young woman, she submitted to this abuse and she continued this abuse. Things changed a little bit once I found out what was going on. Driving recklessly, scaring the person in the passenger seat by the way that you're driving and weaving through. Emotional abuse. Okay, insulting her, making her feel bad about herself, making her think that she's crazy, denying that you've said things, making, well, that's all in your imagination. Playing mind games, humiliating her in front of family and friends, like the one before. I'm going to out you. I'm going to tell everybody about your drug abuse or your substance abuse. Constantly criticizing her parenting skills. What are you doing? How are you doing that? You're a bad mother. You're a horrible mother. No wonder the kids don't like you. The kids don't call you. The kids don't spend time with you. And when the kids get home from school, they go straight to their room and they stay there until I get home because you're such a horrible, horrible mother. If you gained any more weight, a hippopotamus would be thinner than you. Just absolute insults to belittle everything that she's trying to do. Insulting her education level, insulting, just finding things that she is insecure about and then picking on them, and then turn around and use the kids to also belittle them. Okay, if you're constantly insulting and belittling the mother of your children, in front of your children, the children are going to think it's okay, and they're going to start doing the same thing to her. And it undermines her authority as a parent, as a leader of the family, and then outright lying to her, cheating on her, okay, controlling her. There's an controlling what activity she's involved in. I had this student one time. Um, she was in my class and she was taking criminal justice classes. And when I was teaching at the junior college level, I was teaching the 8 o'clock class, the 9:30 class, and the 11 o'clock class every day, Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. On Wednesdays, I also taught an afternoon class and an evening class. The evening class was once a week, and this woman was in every one of my classes. And he would call and he would text and he'd disrupt my class and what are you doing and where are you at and who are you spending time with and blah 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 blah, accusing her of cheating on him and just constantly interrupting my class with the phone calls. And I tried to take the phones away from everybody, and she says I can't not do that. If I don't answer the phone, my husband will beat me and blah blah blah. So I picked up the phone one day and his name was Bullet. His street name was Bullet. She called he called and I answered the phone. I said, "This is so and so's phone. How can I help you?" And he goes, "Well, I want to talk to my wife." I said, "Your wife is in the middle of a class, and you're calling and you're texting is disturbing this class, and you're causing me grief. What I need you to do is to stop calling." He goes, "Well, I need to know where she is." I go, "She is with me. She is with me Monday through Thursday from 8 a.m. until 12:15. And on Wednesday, she's with me from 3 p.m. until 9 p.m. You need to just leave her be so she can get her education. And if you don't stop, I'm going to I know a little bit more about you and I'm going to respond in ways that you are not going to like. So you need to make sure that you stop bothering my student." Well, what I didn't know was that he was the nephew of the provost of the school. So he called the provost of the school and called his aunt and said, Aunt Bullet, um, my wife is in this class and I tried calling her. The teacher answered the phone and told him that I'm not allowed to talk to her. I'm not allowed to do any of these things. So the provost of the school called me into her office uh, on a FERPA violation. And I said, "That's not a FERPA violation." He goes, "Well, you gave away student information." I said, "We're talking about this couple, right?" "Yes." "And we're talking about Bullet, right?" "Yes." "And how is Bullet related to you?" And uh, she said, "That's not important." I said, "I already know. You're his aunt." Okay. "And this is not a FERPA violation. I am protecting my students from domestic violence. And you need to make a point to tell him to stop." She goes, "No, what we're going to do is we're going to write you up and we're going to recommend your termination at the end of the semester." I go, "Oh, are we?" So let me tell you and show you what I'm going to do. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I called the federal parole officer and I said, "Hey, John, you got this guy on your uh, list?" And he goes, "Yeah, I got this guy on his list." I said, "This is what he's doing." He goes, "Oh, really?" He goes, I go, "I know, we both know why he's on probation. He's involved in human trafficking. And this is what he's doing to his wife. And now he's trying to get me in trouble at work. Can we take care of this?" And he goes, "How would you like it done?" I said, "I'd like his parole revoked. I'd like him sent to prison." He goes, "Done. I'll have a warrant for his arrest at the end of the day." And the provost just looked at me and said, "You're not going to do that." I said, "You're going to terminate me for protecting my students, which is my job to protect my students. I'm going to make sure that your family is destroyed." Well, I wasn't terminated, and she is no longer provost. Uh, so that's how things work with domestic violence. You need to find somebody strong enough to help fight against domestic violence. And this is controlling and isolating, and they keep you away from family. I had another family. She goes, I can't wait uh, until I can get you away from your parents because your parents are controlling, and I want to be able to keep you and have you do what I want you to do, and I can't do that as long as your family is involved in our life. I didn't marry your family. I married you. Um, that relationship is no longer uh, in session because when you marry a person, you marry into their family, and their family is part of that life. Um, and then you can use jealousy to justify the isolation. I don't want you going out because some other guy's going to take you. Um, you don't let her drive or have access to a vehicle. You don't allow her. A lot of times, women are not allowed to learn the English. I had a neighbor. He got this bride, internet bride. She was from modern day Ukraine. She came over and she spoke Russian. She didn't speak English, and he wouldn't let her learn English, so she couldn't come over to the house and talk to us, tell us what was going on. Um, Scary little world. But being Russian and Ukrainian, she had a different style of modesty, and she'd go sunbathe in the nude in the backyard. There was a privacy fence, so nobody could see in. But what she didn't realize was that at the back of the house, the alley was almost as high as the privacy fence, and people could see over the privacy fence and see her sunbathing back there. And he threw a fit and beat the stuffing out of her, got all angry and upset. Tactical SWAT team had to come save her life. Not letting her have friends or family, not letting her move away or moving her away from friends and family is also another way, because this way she has no way to contact and no way to find safety or rescue. And they're also threatening friends and family members so that they may be reluctant to have contact with her. If you keep trying to contact her, I'm going to do this to her. I'm going to do that to her. Using the children, okay, making her feel guilty about the children, criticizing her parenting skills, not paying child support, refusing to relay messages, using visitation to harass her, threatening to take the kids away from her, threatening to move out of the country with the children, threatening to call CPS or INS or ICE, to have ICE come get them and take them off if they don't comply with what they want, threatening and or actually harming the children to make her comply with his demands, teaching the kids to disrespect her, undermining her authority. If she says no, the abuser automatically says yes. Okay. Using male privilege. Okay. This one is as old as itself. You treat her like a servant. Okay. And this is where the feminist movement came about, because women were not treated as equals, as helpers. They were treated as servants. It's their job to do the dishes and keep the house clean and care of the children and prepare meals and all of these things. Even if she worked outside of the home, it was still her job inside the home. Okay. Making all the decisions for the family and not giving her input on how the finances are made or spent. Defining the roles, the men's roles and the women's roles. They don't have to follow the patriarchy. They're expected to be treated with a level of respect that's not returned. And then quoting the Bible and using the Bible to justify his actions. The specific scripture, I don't know the specific book verse, but Paul tells women to submit to their husbands and to their needs and desires. That's not exactly what it was talking about. Economic abuse. I had a client when I was a probation officer. She was on probation. She got busted for possession of methamphetamines. And through interviews and through my counseling and through the things that I did as a probation officer, I learned that she was She was a mule for her husband. But in the process, she was not allowed to ever have any money. She wasn't allowed to, and if she was given money, she had to provide a receipt and she had to account for every penny that she spent. Okay. She wasn't given access to the family income. She wasn't given access to the credit card. She wasn't given access to the bank amount. She doesn't know, she was required to get great amounts of debt in her name. Okay. And then we find this more often in common law marriages and marriages where there's not a legal marriage license. The husband will get all of the debt in her name so that if they ever break up, she's saddled with this debt and he's not. And he just walks away. Kind of refusing to pay child support. They're his kids, but he's not going to pay child support to make sure that they're taken care of. Not allowing her to complete job training classes, not allowing her to go to college, forcing her to do illegal work, like the woman that I was telling you about. She was forced to be a mule to transport drugs, actually across the border, across the southern border. But she got caught in the United States. They didn't charge her federally; they charged her with possession inside the United States. Coercion and threats. They're threats to kill, threats to hurt her, threatens to leave her. A lot of women do take the role as homemaker and they stay at home with the kids. I'm going to leave you, and then what are you going to do? You have no job, you have no job skills. You need to comply with what I'm doing, or you're going to be left literally in the streets with no way to do things. So when I was worked for CPS, the woman, the investigator for APS, worked across the street, across the hallway. And, she asked me to be involved with an interview because this woman, she was a wife, but she had a low IQ. And because of my education, she thought I would be better, my experience and my expertise, she thought I would be better doing the interview with her, which I thought was weird, and you'll know why it's weird here in a minute. But she had me do the interview about how she's being abused and what's going on in her house. And she said that her husband was tricking her out, was selling her. Her friends could come over and have sex with her for 50 or $100, but she didn't mind because she enjoyed having sex. And then as long as I gave her husband 50 or $100, whichever her husband said, she would have sex with me too, and it would be okay. And I'm thinking that what happened was that APS knew what was going on. And most APS investigators are women. So they tell them, you don't tell any woman, you do anything that this man tells you to do, you do it. You answer his questions. He's turned this woman into a slave to men, and she knew it. So she had me do the interview. And, we, got the woman out of the household. The state paid for her divorce. They found her a new house. They put her in a home, in an adult foster home for people with MHMR and developmental problems. The husband was sent to prison for human trafficking, and those are some of the things that were happening and going on. They also, especially in this world of ICE, there's a lot of illegal immigrants or undocumented immigrants or immigrants that are not here legally, however you want to define them. I'm old, so I define them as illegal immigrants because they entered the country illegally. And they didn't follow the laws to become part of our society. So abusers will threaten them. If you don't do what I say and you don't comply with what I say, I'm going to call ICE and I'm going to have ICE come get you. And you know what ICE does to people. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago when in our in our discussions on protests and demonstrations and all the demonstrations because how evil and horrible ICE is. Okay, so is this going to turn around? The threat of calling ICE, is that going to get a person who is subject to the jurisdiction of ICE to comply, to submit to the demands and the commands of this abusing individual? Of course it is, because ICE is killing people. ICE is kidnapping people and separating them from their children and sending them away. You don't want ICE involved in your life because of what they're doing. So abusers are using the reputation of ICE to get the victims of their abuse to continue to submit. And it is, and now we've got the government also refusing to fund ICE because they're so bad and so horrible and they're doing such horrible things. Even the government is on my side. They don't like ICE either because ICE is so bad. We can't fund ICE because they're that bad. So you would better submit or I'm going to call ICE and they're coming to get you. So the abusers are going to find ways to coerce and threaten and to make them do things that make the victims of their abuse do things that are not necessarily acceptable, and make them do things that are illegal. Sexual abuse. Yes, you can rape your sexual partner. Okay. Sex is consensual. Okay. Forcing her to engage in sexual activity is rape. Period. Even if you're married. Refusing to wear a condom is sexual abuse because she might not want to get pregnant. Forcing her to get pregnant is a form of abuse. But on the other hand, withholding sexual attention is also abuse. Not having sex with her, not meeting her sexual needs is a form of sexual abuse. Oh, you want me to do this for you? You want me to do that for you? Well, you need to comply. You need to do this. Okay. Forcing her into pornography, taking pictures of her while she's naked, putting them on the phone, and then if you break up, you turn around and you take this porn, and it's porn extortion, and you put these naked pictures of her and these sex tapes online to embarrass her. And then you make her feel guilty for not wanting to have sex. So there's so much that goes around sex because for sex for men is transactional. Sex for women is emotional. Okay. And as much as our society and our community wants to make sex a transactional thing for everybody, male and female, it's just biologically and scientifically impossible. Women can tell you that their sexual activities are transactional all day long. But for those women who do live those lifestyles of transactional sexual activity, we find and we learned that they have higher levels of substance abuse. They have higher levels of suicide. They have higher levels of just not working well because of the emotional baggage that comes with sexual relationships. Or you can, if you do have a partner who was a virgin before having sex, and you abuse them during that first sexual encounter, and then as you go through their sexual relationship with this person, and you continue the abuse in this bondage sex, then you find that she thinks that's the only way that sex is supposed to be done, and that her getting hurt during sex is proper, authorized, and allowed. Using physical violence. This includes pushing, slapping, pulling her hair, kicking her, punching her, grabbing her, using weapons, not allowing her to sleep, not allowing her access to medical attention, not allowing her access to medication, not allowing her access to food, strangulation, hurting her while she's pregnant. These are all forms of physical abuse. Statistics, okay? And we all like statistics. In this picture, Libre, actually means freedom. And a lot of times women think that the only way that they can get free is through suicide. 1,247 women and 440 men are killed or were killed. I know I've got 2,000 here, but this is revolving. This is every year by their intimate partner. Almost, almost 1,300 women, almost 500 men, rounding up, are killed each year by their partners. When a gun is involved, the result is 12 times more often. Okay. Domestic violence exists in all socioeconomic statuses, all races, all religions, all ethnic groups. Nobody is immune. No group of people is immune from domestic violence. They're twice as likely to be from disadvantaged communities. Well-to-do neighborhoods are more likely to hide or deny the abuse because you don't want to lose your status. You don't want to lose the advantages that you have because you don't want to become homeless or without money or without a job. So women who are victims of abuse in upper socioeconomic levels are going to hide the abuse. Domestic violence makes up 20% of all American crime. It is a factor in 44% of all female suicide because they have given their hearts, they've given their lives, they've given all of their love to this man or other woman. And all they get in return is abuse and and violence. And the only way they think that they can leave, get out of this, is through suicide. Domestic violence is more prevalent in relationships where wedding vows have not been exchanged. I discussed this a little bit ago on how all of this works. Okay. I'll leave him if he ever hits me. And I hear this from females in my classes for the 20 years I've been teaching criminal justice, and I talk about domestic violence. I hear women all day long say, I will leave him if he ever hits me. What's keeping her there if there's no marriage? If there's no ring on the finger, there's no bound of marriage. What's keeping her there? What's keeping her to be part of this relationship? But we find that domestic violence exists more in common law relationships than we do in actual legal marriage. 15% of all domestic violence occurs against men. Okay? Men are less likely to report it because of the involvement of being the stigma of having to state that a girl beat them up. So the Luttenberg Amendment to the Gun Control Act. This is important. It was passed into legislation in 1997, and it prohibits any person with a domestic violence conviction from possessing a firearm. Okay. Cops who are convicted of domestic violence automatically lose their job. Nurses who are convicted of domestic violence automatically lose their jobs, but that's in another law. Possession of a firearm by somebody who has been convicted of domestic violence falls under federal jurisdiction, and you end up in federal prison. Battered women syndrome. This was a defense that was established in the 1970s. The first successful case was depicted in the movie The Burning Bed, starring Farrah Fawcett. If you can get The Burning Bed, you need to watch The Burning Bed. The plot of this movie is a woman kills her husband because of the abuse inside the home. It established that the abuse must be documented by the police. The defense must show that the abuse was in the lines and in a fear of death. Because this woman killed her husband, burned him to death in his bed while he slept. He was unconscious. He was drunk. He passed out. She went and got the gas. She emptied the house. She filled up the car with gas. She put the kids in the car. She took the gas can for the lawnmower, brought it in the house, poured it on the bed, and lit the bed on fire and killed him. She was arrested for first-degree murder. And they used the battered women syndrome as a defense, and she was acquitted of crimes. Okay, so I conducted a research study while I was at grad school. And this is a survey of 73 self identified homosexual male and female adults. These are the results that I found that 28% of our LGBTQ community have been threatened by harm from their partners. 31% had been harmed. 22% report property destruction. 19% say that they're pressured into sexual activities with other people. 38% feared becoming a victim of domestic violence, and they refused to talk about it, and they refused to discuss it because they believed that it would be detrimental to the LGBTQ community if they came out and talked about reporting the abuse, which is absolutely scary. That we are more dedicated to protecting the LGBTQ community than we are about protecting the members of the LGBTQ community from domestic violence. So, responding to domestic violence, you need to first stop the violence. Okay. You need to separate those who are in conflict. You need to administer required medical care. You need to determine if assault has occurred. If an assault has occurred, somebody must go to jail. If no probable cause exists, you need to moderate the situation. If the parties cannot be calmed down, you need to separate them. In Abilene, there is a domestic violence shelter that the police department can bring a female victim of domestic violence to the Hope House or to the Noah Project. And they can stay there, and these nonprofit organizations can help these women. If or you need to send the man somewhere and have him go stay at a hotel, or see if there's a family member or somebody that can go. If there's probable cause and you can see that somebody was hurt, somebody has to go to jail. Okay. Never enter a home blind. Never, ever enter a home blind. Okay. And the reason being, the city of Odessa a few years ago had some officers that were killed because of domestic violence. Domestic violence is one of the most dangerous calls that you could ever respond to. Okay, much like active shooter situations, even if there's not a gun involved, domestic violence is dangerous. Okay, and it's even more dangerous when substance abuse is being abused, where drugs and alcohol or weapons are involved. Okay, so in Odessa, 2 police officers respond to a domestic disturbance, and they were killed. A third was critically wounded by a gunman who led authorities on an hour-long standoff. The woman, Judy White, had escaped the home, and she'd gone over. She was at a neighbor's house when they called the police because Larry White had been beating her and had been abusing her, and this had been going on and on and on. So they call the police, and officers Corporal Arlie Jones and Scott Gardner were fatally shot in the backyard as they tried to make contact with Larry White. These police officers were told that if they went directly up to the front door, that he would kill them, that he had a weapon. So, being good cops, they thought they'd go to the back door, and they couldn't see what was going on inside the house. And using a shotgun, Larry White shot both of these guys and a third. There was a 4-hour standoff until he finally surrendered at about 10 p.m. Okay, so this is my discussion on domestic violence. Okay, let me close this. Go back over here. Unprecedented high in 1994. In 2007, the violent crime rates began to rise again. Preliminary 2011 data indicated started to show a downward trend. I don't see that downward trend in the 2020s. Domestic violence, um, depending on love and support, it can foster violence. Um, Covered all that. We've discussed the stalking is another form of abuse with strong connections, domestic violence, sexual assaults, all start with stalking. Woman breaks up with you and you follow her around. You go everywhere that they go. Um, Elder abuse is also on the rise. Okay, school and college violence. Publicity has generated widespread, sometimes baseless fear. 17 million incidents were reported in the early 2000s. Only 3.3% of active shooters or violence occur on school colleges. Um, Relatively, schools are safe, but when there's a school shooter, it becomes world news. These are the ones these are the things that make the news. I wrote a paper couple years ago about the um, school shooting down in South Texas. I forgot the name of the town, but I wrote a paper on it, got it published. It was quite important and interesting. Okay, so school resource officers, zero tolerance policies, proactive lockdowns um, are all things that we do to try to stop and to um, fix things. Okay, so we've got a lot of flashpoints and a lot of people, and now what we're finding is, there was a phrase when I was growing up. It was called going postal in the workforce, and going postal. Somebody who was disgruntled with what was going on at work would turn around and bring a gun to work or bring a gun to school, and they would start killing people. So what we found is that we need to establish problem-oriented policing and use problem-oriented policing in Sarah to try to fix it. In Texas, how they're fixing school violence is they're arming the teachers. Okay, so that is my discussion for today. I will see you guys in the forums, and I hope everything is going well, and so on and so forth.